Smash!
Hey, this week we've got This Quar's War Faction Focus Part 5. And in this episode, we'll be talking about none other than the nation of Coftyr, the most royalist that ever royalized. In this video, you can expect a lengthy portion of lore and a little bit of hobbying. I've gone over how I've painted their scheme in a previous video, so I don't have any painting for you. But like I mentioned, this is part 5 of an ongoing series, so if you wish to, you can check out the other ones afterwards. I think you'll like them if you like this one. But before we get into the video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and if you really dig it, consider becoming a channel member. For just $3 a month, you get early access to videos, and for $5, you get access to weekly Q&As, exclusive roles and tiers in the Mishmash Discord, and occasionally exclusive streams. I just want to give a huge thank you to my channel members. You guys are incredible, and you help this channel a lot. And additionally, if you are interested in purchasing anything related to Quar, you can use my affiliate link down below. Doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps me out. Plus, every time you support Wargames Atlantic, it gives them more incentive to make more kits and more factions. But enough of the promotional stuff. Let's get tucked in, have a moth cake, and let's learn about the Coftyrans. So who are the people of Coftyr? Well, Coftyr is the single oldest government kingdom in all of Alwood. Ancient records mentioning the old kings of Coftyr predate the first Sith one by 1,000 years. Every nation in all of Alwood has been conquered, partitioned, and otherwise subjected to the rule of another, but never Coftyr. Now, as I stated previously, Coftyr is the Royalist nation. Now, there are others, of course, but I want to go into something that I haven't gone into prior. What exactly are Royalists? Well, the Royalists themselves are an ideologically diverse group whose main commonality is that they feel the Crusade has to be met with military force. This encompasses several different nations, but Coftyr stands at the forefront. At the forefront of the Royalists are the First Families. Now, these First Families claim to be directly related to one of the most important Quar to ever live, Enkidu the Lawgiver. I'll go into more detail on who Enkidu is in a later video, but in essence, he is the one responsible for creating the laws of war. These are the main laws in which all Quar are bound to, at least in theory. The main thing, however, is that these laws greatly favor those in power, this of course being the Royalists. Now to get more back on track for the Coftyrans, basically these guys are the main reason why the Crusade formed. Coftyr views itself as the last bastion of traditional Quar society. Everything from their uniform to their armaments are usually handmade. This, or they are passed down from previous generations. Their aura is to invoke the feeling of an older era. A more civilized era. All while their Crusader counterparts adorn themselves with utilitarian and, quite frankly, bland attire. Not to mention their usage of unsportsmanlike and barbaric tactics. Not that I blame them, however, because at the end of the day, to be born a Coftyran is to win the first prize in the lottery of life. After all, the nation boasts incredible wealth, unprecedented industrial manufacturing, and the grand armies of the Crymuster. The Crymuster may be lacking in terms of Quar power compared to the Crusader juggernaut, but Coftyran riflers make up for this by means of discipline and execution of strict tactics and planning. Along with this, several of the principalities of Coftyr have come forward to fight for the fatherland. Most notable of these principalities are the Gwynts. But in the newer timeline, several of these principalities have been popping up to fight for their fatherland. Speaking of which, let's get into the main conflict in which the Coftyrans find themselves in. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the actual conflict, we need to talk about something we've already talked about before, but it's important. This, of course, being Coftyr's Great Wall. The main thing keeping Coftyr away from the outside world. The Great Wall has served for over 1,000 years. It is truly a monumental fortification, and it extends along the entirety of the border of Coftyr. New riflers are actually instructed along with working in the defense systems along the wall itself as their main form of training. In a way, the wall itself is not only a defense system, but an emblem of Coftyr's opposition to the Crusade. But like we mentioned in the previous episode, this wouldn't last forever. As in 1771, The Great Wall had been breached. The Crusaders had launched a full-scale attack onto Coftyr, but this would ultimately prove unsuccessful due to the 1772 Scythian. Despite being technically victorious in this conflict, Coftyr's armies, morale, and economy as a whole would be in shambles, all while dealing with an incredibly dangerous Scythian. It wouldn't be until 1774 that Coftyr was finally out of harm's way, but this didn't necessarily mean there wasn't a bumpy ride ahead. At this time, the King of Coftyr, King Mervyn IV, would disrupt 3 separate coups upon his throne, only managing to maintain leadership through his will and political acumen. The once proud nation was now going through its darkest era. A few years later, however, the rebuilding process would finally be kicked off. Due to no ongoing conflicts and the nation of Gwent providing great riches to the fatherland, Coftyr was finally getting back on track. The Crymuster army was now swelling with new recruits, many of which were retired military veterans from neighboring states. These men were green, but they were quickly deployed to the wall alongside the Tolmarese border. Veteran NCOs were teaching their sections and squads unofficial small unit tactics. They had learned how the Crusaders had fought, and in a way, I would argue that they were learning to fight like them as well. Over the years, the Crymuster and the nation of Coftyr would continue on this path, though of course their reputation and morale would never be in the same place from before the era of the Crusade, but things were looking up. The forces were swelling, the economy was growing, and the nation wasn't entirely engulfed in chaos. However, things would change, as in 1781 the Aran invasion would take place. During this time, the Crymuster had actually invaded into Tulmore, this of course being a favor to the Gwents after their great aid in rebuilding the nation. The double-decker shitstorm that took place was a combination of this campaign, bringing most of their forces away from the homeland, and the fact that they didn't believe that the Aran were invading them. It took 3 separate attempts to tell the High Command that they were invading because most of them brushed it off as a joke or a mistake.
Think it through, very bad things are going to happen to all of us. Yeah. Someone mindfully helping me!
The attack would be devastating, as the wall would once again be breached. Though, like the previous invasion, Coftyr would endure this attack. The attack itself was rather lax compared to the previous one. This was all by design, however. The Western Aran put up a good fight, but this was mostly to make appearances. Thanks to this miscommunication, Coftyr would be able to endure the attack and eventually drive off the invading forces. This would give Coftyr the advantage of being able to set out proper defenses. Despite not being nearly as devastating as the first attack, Coftyr is still recovering. The moral defeat of having the wall breached a second time is not lost on the current population. The invasion had left several of their stockpiles and materials taken and looted, and not to mention the immense debt they now owe to the bankers of Gwent. And I can't imagine the Gwents are too happy with their invasion into Tulmore being put on hold to deal with the Aran. That, and they're trying to help their Crievish allies by reforming the RCEF, or the Royal Coftyran Expeditionary Force. This has greatly soured several of the relationships with their other principalities within the Father Nation. These smaller territories such as Allenbeck and the Glomhin have been forced to bankroll Coftyr's defense. Not only are they paying out of pocket, they're also supplying their own young riflers as well as their own weapons and supplies. Dark days have engulfed the nation of Coftyr in shadows. Every silver lining seems to mean less and less, and in the 25th year of his reign, King Mervyn III can only wonder if his great nation, his home that has lasted for thousands of years, may finally come to a crumble, and that he, amongst several generations of great kings of Coftyr, may very well be the last. If you can't tell, I really do like the Royalists, and especially the Coftyrans. Though I don't exactly have a favorite, nor do I dislike any of the factions within Quar, I can't help but think the Royalists have been getting quite the harsh reputation. Though while I totally understand why people give them this reputation, as they are the ones in power, the Royalists are not entirely the monsters most people make them out to be. Oddly enough, they want to have a peaceful resolution to the war itself. They don't want to fight. And of course, that doesn't excuse the bad things that they do, but at the end of the day, most Quar don't want to fight in general. They just don't know how to stop. And thus, our little anteater friends are thrown into conflict. Constant conflict. brutal conflict. For the history of Allwood is written in blood. Well, a bit of a grim note to end on the lore portion of the video. I think it's about time we add a little bit more of a positive note and make it full-scale grimsicle. Like in the previous episode, I'm going to be kitbashing a custom figure for the Coftyrans, this being a tracker of sorts. Though on the other hand, you could just say that this is a member of one of the many principalities. But to start things out for this figure, I'm using a regular Coftyran and I'm adding a backpack from Turnout 28. This backpack coming from the Grogs. Seemed fitting, and I've actually used this in a previous kitbash that I kinda showed you earlier. After doing so, I would glue on a knapsack that I took from the Plague Monk's kit from Age of Sigmar. I don't know what he's got in there, but I imagine it's got some goodies. Maybe some crickets? I don't know. Now for his melon, I'm actually going to be using a head from one of the sharpshooters, but the problem is I need one of the little neck coifs. To do so, I'm going to have to snip off one of the original Coftyr necks, and we'll have to make sure to really sand things down for a good adherence. The head I'm using is from the sharpshooter sets like I mentioned, this being the Boonie hat. I can't not use this hat for something special, so I think this is a perfect usage. After I sanded it down the exact same way I sanded down the neck coif, I would use a little bit of super glue. I want to fit the pieces together and give it just a little bit of extra time to adhere fully. Once I knew the bits were sturdy, I would glue them onto the body. Already I'm really liking how this guy looks, and it's really not a very sophisticated kitbash. That's what I love about Quar, however. The simplicity allows your mind to fill in those gaps. I also do want to state, in my first video I mentioned Tamiya doesn't work with these minis. I was flat out wrong, I just had a dud. Now for his arms, I decided to use the Crusader arms with the Harlech, as I thought having rolled up sleeves would work well for a tracker and kind of an outdoorsman Quar. However, I decided for the other arm that I wanted to go for a nice little wave, this being from the regular Crusader kit. Unfortunately, the other Crusader arm with the Harlech is designed to go around a Crusader body. That Coftyr chest plate just kinda blocks it, and it doesn't really adhere nicely, but I'm still happy with the pose overall. And with that, we've got a great little figure. It's nothing too flashy, but he really does stand out from the rest of my Quar. But with that, I think I've gone over the basics and the more interesting portions of the Coftyran lore that I haven't gone over before. But I can assure you, this will not be the last time we return to the nation of Coftyr. But ominous foreshadowing aside, I think I've definitely flattened my beak enough for one video. So if you liked it, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, share it with a friend, and remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.